Hey everyone, it's Amy and Jenny. It's been a hot minute, but we're back with another video for anyone feeling really confused about what to do in life.
And it's a hot summer night in LA, so grab your drink of choice and join us for this chit chat. You know how they say it's always easy to look back on your life and see how everything matches up? I think in the same way, it's so much easier to pinpoint what were those critical decisions that actually altered the trajectory of your life. But when you're in the thick of it, about to make that decision, it's really hard to know.
And I feel like we reference gut feelings, intuition, or this inner voice that's pushing you to make this change, but you have no idea why, and you have no idea how it's gonna turn out.
Yeah.
And so this is us trying to break down that process.
And number one, that first step is simply listening. Listening to that intuition. But to start, what even is that intuition in the first place?
Yeah, if this intuition were a person, what traits would it have? And I think first it's they kind of say the same shit over and over again. It's that one friend who says the same stories over and over. And then it's also this personification is annoying because it makes you feel uncomfortable because it keeps pushing you in this direction that you're not sure you want to go.
But on that same side of the coin, it's pushing you towards a version of yourself that you know is more true to you. So reminding you of who you are or what your needs are, especially during the moments that you forget. So for each stage, basically Amy and I both have our own examples, one in relationships, one in career. So I guess to start for you, Amy, I know you had a big event earlier this year. Do you kind of want to share what that was, and also what was that inner voice saying to you?
Yeah, so earlier this year, I actually went through a breakup from a long-term relationship. And I feel my inner voice that was piping up was just asking the question of am I ready to settle down? And I think the inner voice was piping up because of different external circumstances. I was turning 28, about to hit 5-year mark in the relationship, and I think just move forward more seriously. And it was almost this, I felt I could almost perceive what the future could look like. And just with that perception, I didn't know if I wanted to make it a reality.
Yeah.
And I think that my inner voice was asking me are you ready to settle down, Amy? Because I think having dated through all my 20s, I was very curious of who I am in the context without this person. And I really liked myself in the context with this person too. But I think I was just the curiosity and the inner voice of wanting to know myself in the context of my own or with someone else was just, I think, kind of taking over.
And I think for you, it was little whispers here and there sprinkled throughout, that 5-year relationship. But for me, as it pertains to school, career back in the day, it was one loud voice.
It's a boom. It was a boom.
And it was, I think I shared this before, it was 12 a.m. I just finished a 12-hour shift at the hospital. Context, I was on the pre-med track. And then I heard a voice I don't think this is it, right? And it was a month before graduation. It was so clear in that moment that it felt like a lightning bolt, and it forced me to pay attention.
I also feel it's because the pre-med track is so structured.
Yeah.
That I feel you were just check, next check, next check, and then when you got to the last checkbox, it's almost you had the time to look up and evaluate and be this is not what I want to do.
Yes. And I think that's also giving yourself permission that even though you started with this goal in mind, you're allowed to change your mind. I just didn't even have the space to even
acknowledge that voice.
Yeah, you didn't acknowledge that voice, know that it was even there.
The second step to the process is trusting that inner voice. And I feel this is the part where it's really hard and there's the most resistance because you can kind of foresee some of the consequences of really following through with those actions.
And I think a part of this trusting process is how can you validate your intuition, right? So for example, whatever that inner voice is saying, can you treat it as a hypothesis? It's neither true or false yet. What are the pieces of data that you can collect that either supports or refutes that?
I feel like also the data points that you're collecting are like your experiences, like your emotions, and like the reactions that are happening to certain situations.
Right. And also seeing that over a period of time, because then when you see the same thing, remember, intuition is annoying, right? And it repeats itself. So if you see that happening, like that's saying something, right? So I guess like for you in the context of the breakup that you were mentioning, how was that like validation process?
I think there were definite factors of resistance. Like one is like the security of that relationship and that time and investment, almost like sunk cost fallacy. But I think like most importantly, it's also this like guilt, I think, that you feel very immensely about hurting someone that you really care about and love. But ultimately, I think that is also the reason I was able to process where I was at, is because I realized like there's nothing externally that I would change or ask the other person to change, and that made me really realize like
It's a you thing.
it's a me thing. Like nothing's wrong. It's a me thing, and I just couldn't get that inner voice to shut up. So it kind of led me to where I am right now.
Yeah. And I think it's like for you it's really hard because the sunk cost fallacy in terms of dating for a woman as you're getting older is like very real. And it's hard when there's like nothing wrong with the situation. You know, it's like a you thing.
Yeah, there was like no external concrete evidence. So I think I started collecting more like internal evidence. And I think for me, I just realized like I'm not really at the point where I'm ready to settle down.
I guess like switching gears to the career example, right? In terms of trusting and like validating that process. I think for me, a key thing that I picked up on is that compared to my peers, I just did not have the same level of engagement and curiosity as them, as they were like doing their own research stuff. And I'm like, I don't really give a shit. I don't really care to. And I think those feelings started picking up, but I was also so busy like checking those check boxes, right? And then on the other side of things, the resistance that I personally experienced was like similar to you, like the cost sunk fallacy, like just dedicating so many years and time towards this, you know, med school goal. But another big thing was like really just unfamiliarity of what is on the other side. I might not know what's on the other side, but at least I do know that what I do have is not what I want. So we went through listening to your intuition, trusting that intuition, and then lastly is honoring that intuition. So actually taking action and following through.
I feel like a big part of honoring that intuition is also like persevering, because you have to accept all the consequences that follow, like good and bad. And I think with something like a breakup or a career change, like any big change like that, like, you know, just because you let go of something for something else, it definitely doesn't mean it's gonna be like butterflies and rainbows right off the bat.
Yeah,
you know?
it kind of reminds me of, you know, the author Mark Manson? He has this really good article about what shit sandwich do you want to eat today, or something like that. And it's basically saying like whatever decision you make, there's always going to be a shit sandwich involved. But like, would you rather have bologna or ham? Which one would you rather have? Like, which consequences would you rather bear?
And I think to build off of that, like it's totally normal to feel this like cocktail of like conflicting emotions.
Yeah.
Like you'll feel grief, like regret and uncertainty, but I think you also feel peace and excitement of like what's to come.
To wrap up our full examples, once I made that career shift and all I had to go off of was like my curiosity in entrepreneurship. And I remember when, again, I was in the thick of it and I was getting rejected by every single company that I applied to because obviously my resume was so not relevant. Looking back on it now, like 7-8 years later, like thank God I listened to that intuition.
With my big life transition, like I'm still in the thick of it. So I'm figuring things out as I go. But I feel like just giving agency to that inner voice, like obviously like has been really difficult. Like I think sometimes things get a little bit worse before they get better. But I also feel like I'm living. Like I feel like I've just experienced so many emotions and experiences that I never did before. And I feel like that helps me reaffirm that
You're being reminded that you're human.
yes, I'm very human, and I think I'm learning that as I go too. So I think even though it's difficult, like that inner voice like deserves some space in our lives.
Yeah. And I guess like to wrap it all up, like we mentioned the three things in terms of like listen, trust, and honor. And I think the great thing about doing that again and again is that that builds the overall
Capacity,
exactly.
muscle.
Yes, to do that. And it's almost like you're building a reputation with yourself. And every time you honor it and like finish that loop, the next time it has a little whisper or like a loud boom, you'll hear it so much quicker. So yeah, thanks so much for watching. I know it's been a while since we made a video, but more to come. Bye.